All right, good morning, everybody. Today is October 28th, and we have Hurricane Zeta that is just about to hit us. The campus closes at noon, but this is 10 o'clock, so we're having the lecture, of course. If you are in my noon class, obviously you didn't meet, but this lecture is for my 10 o'clock and for my noon class. Since it's the same class, it'll work both ways. So, and we're in the same spot basically for each class. So everybody, I want you to stay safe for the hurricane. Doesn't look like this one's going to be too bad, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared. And I will see everybody next Wednesday, of course. Anyway, let's keep on moving. When we left off, we were talking about towns and the emergence of burghers and middle-class people. We talked about how towns would have walls around them. They tended to get pretty crowded. There were problems with disease and fires and being dirty and filthy because, of course, all the waste and garbage gets thrown in the streets. Rivers along towns would often get very polluted with a lot of this stuff. You can see the problems. But nonetheless, towns are also going to be a source of wealth. They're going to be a source of literacy and education. People go there to learn new skills. People go there to become more fluent and move themselves forward. And these skilled craftsmen that will start popping up in towns are going to end up being incredibly influential on the development of the countries that will eventually make up Central and Western Europe. So let's get into that again very quickly. We talked about skilled craftsmen. We talked about tanners and blacksmiths and wrights. I don't think I mentioned the wright in my 10 o'clock class. A wright is a very highly skilled woodworker, like a shipwright is somebody who builds and repairs ships. And that's a very, very important skill and one that takes a long time to learn. We talked about coopers, of course. Y'all remember a cooper is a barrel maker. And we're making a lot of barrels, and it takes a long time to learn that skill and get good at it. And it's something that these guys expected to get paid well for. And so I will recap from last time. Let's say that we, the class, are the barrel makers in a community. And we worked really hard to get this skill. And what happens is I agree to make a barrel. Somebody comes in and he says, hey, I need a barrel made. And I say, okay, well, I'll make you one. It'll be really high quality. And here's the price. But then you over here, you're also a barrel maker. And you go to the guy and you say, hey, don't buy from him, buy from me. I'll make you the same barrel, but I'll give you a better deal on it. And so maybe he turns around and goes to you. And then you over here say, don't listen to those two. I'll give you an even better price, right? And so eventually what we're doing is we're undercutting each other and we're driving down the amount of money that we can make because of competition. Now, in 2020, that's perceived as a good thing. That's good for the consumer. Competition is what keeps an economy healthy. But during the late Middle Ages, that was not positive, right? The barrel makers don't like that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, all of us barrel makers, let's meet at my house. Come on over and we're going to have a meeting to kind of address this. And so we all get in the room together and I say, look, we're the barrel makers in our community. And there's however many of us there are. And we all do good work and we all worked very hard to get this skill. And our profits are getting hurt because we keep undercutting each other on price. So what do you say we do this? Let's all agree to charge one price for our barrel. And it doesn't matter who the guy goes to, a barrel in our town will always cost the exact same amount. That way, we don't compete with each other. And this guy can't go shopping around to find somebody to give him a better deal. And what we'll also do is agree on a standard type of barrel. So he gets the exact same barrel at the exact same price, no matter who he goes to. Because you see, if we all agree to charge the exact same price, we can kind of charge whatever we want, can't we? We can fix the price at what we think it ought to be as long as we stick together. And what we now have the emergence of are organizations called guilds. Organizations called guilds. Groups of craftsmen in the same profession that work together to fix the price and the product for their own benefit. And the guilds will end up becoming very wealthy, very influential, very significant, because they can wield a lot of power over government. They can wield a lot of power over rules and laws. Now, the guilds are going to have to get a little more complex. Now, let's walk through all of this, so bear with me. We're all, say, the barrel makers in a town, and we all agree to fix the price, and we all agree to make the same barrel. So no competition. That's good for us, and we can all hike the price up. And we're doing good with that. And now we have a guild, and we're all making more money than we made before, and I don't have to worry about you undercutting me on price when somebody comes into town looking for one. And then some guy comes in from out of town, and he shows up, and he says, I'm a pretty good barrel maker myself, and I don't really want to be a part of the guild. Forget that. I don't want to deal with those guys. I'm going to just set up my own barrel shop, and I'll charge whatever price I want. And so, if you want to mess with the guild and pay their prices, go right ahead. But I'm not in the guild, and I don't want to fool with that. Well, what are we as the Barrel Makers Guild going to do? We're going to run that guy out of town. That's exactly right. We're going to say, oh, heck no, buddy. You're not coming into our town and undercutting us. We're going to make sure that there's a law in our town. We're going to make sure that there is a rule. You do not get to make a barrel unless you are in the guild and follow the guild's rules. It is illegal to not be a guildsman and still make the barrels. So when that guy comes in from out of town, if he isn't with us, he ain't making barrels. And not only are we going to be able to run that guy out of town, but the town leadership will back us up. As a matter of fact, many of us are the town leadership, aren't we? And other guildsmen and other guilds are also members of the leadership in the town. And they're with us. The blacksmith guild and the shipwright guild and the tanner guild and the cobbler guild and the whatever guild. That we're all understanding that we got to work together. Well, then that guy shows up and he says, okay, I get it. I understand why the guild is so important. And so I'll tell you what, sign me up. I'll join the guild then. Well, are we going to let him in? Or are we going to say, you bet, buddy, come on in out of town and we'll just sign you right up in the guild? Why might we not? Why might we say, you know what, buddy, I don't think you can be in our guild? Maybe we've already got enough barrel makers in our town, right? Maybe you do. You make a great barrel guy, and we'd love to help you out, but there's only so much business to go around, and our town has enough barrel makers. And so I'll tell you what you need to do is go to that town over there, and maybe they have an opening in the guild. And you know what? In a few years, maybe we'll get an opening and we'll let you in. But our town has enough barrel makers already, so the answer is still going to have to be no. You get where I'm coming from. We're starting to set some rules here to make sure that our profits are maximized. We don't have too much competition. Good for us, maybe not so good for the consumer. You remember we talked about knighthood, and there's a series of steps to becoming a knight. And you have to go through all of the motions, starting when you're rather young. First, you start out as a page, and you're sent off to a nobleman, and you have to do all kinds of grunt work as a little boy. And then you become a squire, right? And then you get assigned to the knight, and then you have all this other work that you have to do. And then eventually you can be knighted if you pass all of the tests. Y'all remember that? Well, a system is going to emerge that is very similar. A system is going to emerge that is very similar. How can I become a barrel maker in this community and be in the guild and have a secure life? Well, and we'll go to a barrel maker, right? We'll find ourselves a cooper. Well, here's how it works. When you are about 7 years old, you will be sent away by your family to live with a master craftsman. Now, there's a pretty good chance that you come from a family of craftsmen yourself. There's no hard and fast rules about this, but you have to have parents that know the right people or have the right intentions for you. So what's going to happen is that you will be sent away and you will become an apprentice. You will become an apprentice at about age 7. Now, you will not be sent off as an apprentice to the craftsman up the street. And you may not be sent off as an apprentice to do the same thing that your dad did. Your dad may be a cooper making barrels, but you're going to send this kid off to be an apprentice to a blacksmith, or you're going to send him off to be an apprentice to a shipwright, or whatever your family thinks you're cut out to do, if you get my meaning, or whatever we think there's going to be a demand for. You know, we're going to need a lot more ships built over the next few years, so I think my son would be good going into that. You get the idea. It was very common, typical, that you would be sent to another town. You would be sent a good distance away. Now, why do you think parents would do that? Why am I going to send my 7-year-old son way far away to work with some master craftsman? Chances are I might not really even know the guy, but I've just made this arrangement so he can be his apprentice. Why am I sending my son there? Why not just send him up the street? Or why not let him be my own apprentice? What's going on there? So he can't come back. Now, it's not that I don't want him to come back home, but the point here is my son is going to have to learn how to take care of himself. He's going to have to learn how to solve his own problems and be independent. Life is not easy. Life is going to involve all kinds of struggles and all kinds of difficulties. And I understand that part of my son growing up into adulthood is having to deal with those without running back home to mommy and daddy whenever he gets upset, right? Because the minute he shows up as the apprentice to that master craftsman, his name becomes boy, and the only thing he knows how to say is yes, sir. He's going to get up really early in the morning and get that shop ready and clean that shop. He is going to run errands. He is going to do this. He is going to do that. And everything he is told to do, he had, by George, better do it. And the only answer he's going to have is, yes, sir, what can I do next? And there's a pretty good chance that he's going to be treated pretty roughly. There's a pretty good chance he is not going to like what he is expected to do. Welcome to life. Welcome to being an adult. Welcome to the real world. Adults don't get to go crawl back under the covers when it's cold in the morning and they don't feel like getting out of bed, right? What an adult does is get up, put their pants on, and go to work. And so I'm sending my son off to toughen him up and teach him how to actually be an adult. Well, as an apprentice, starting at about age 7, he will start off doing the kind of simple tasks that young children can do. As he moves into his teenage years, the master craftsman will start teaching him how to do the skill. He might be assigned to somebody else. You know, he might be with somebody for a while, and then he might move on to a different type of craftsman or something like that. He might start off as a blacksmith's apprentice, but then as his skills develop, he might go on to become a tinsmith, which is a harder job to do if he's particularly adept at it. You get the idea. But by the time he is in his early 20s, he has spent years developing the ability to, let's say, make good barrels because he's been apprenticed to a master craftsman. And then, if there's room in the town for another barrel maker, maybe one of the craftsmen has retired or something like that, that town will then allow him to join the guild and he can be a guildsman. So it is a process that requires you to earn your way in. It is not a giveaway. You have to put the time and the effort into making it happen. So back to that original example, if we're the barrel makers in a town and somebody from out of town shows up and, man, I can make a great barrel and I'd love to join your guild, We're going to say, yeah, I get that, but you see, this kid has been one of our apprentices for several years. He has been with us. He has put the time into our community, and so he gets to go at the front of the line. He has earned seniority when that spot opens up. And so you don't just show up. You have to put your time in. You have to do the work to get the benefit. When we see, oh, and by the way, being a guildsman now comes with all kinds of great privileges. All of a sudden, the minute you are admitted into the Cooper's Guild or the Wrights Guild or whatever, all of a sudden you have become a very eligible young man. All of a sudden, all these parents in town would very much like to introduce you to their daughter. And we can understand why. You now will have the ability to make a good living for the rest of your life. You will be able to provide for your family. Plus, you have already demonstrated that you have the maturity to actually do the work. It isn't just that you have the skill, but you have proven that you are a hardworking, mature person. And so obviously that means you'll be a good husband, you'll be a good father, etc. If you are in the guild, you are guaranteed obviously to make a good price on every barrel that you make. Also, the guild has other perks. If, for example, you get injured on the job, the guild will take care of you for the rest of your life. Because people get hurt on the job. These are difficult and dangerous tasks these men are doing. If you get killed on the job, which of course could happen, the guild will take care of your family for as long as needed. And the guild will make sure that your sons get apprenticed out so that they can end up becoming successful themselves. So being in the guild is terrific, but you have to earn your way in. Now that we see this culture start to develop, we now understand that the middle class, which is really what we're talking about, the burghers, the middle class is going to approach life with a different set of social values because they're going to start seeing the need to earn that privilege as critical for anybody who deserves it. You know, the nobleman up on the hill, he's got wealth, he's got power, he's got privilege, but he didn't do anything to earn it, did he? He was just born into that rich family and inherited all of it. And so, I don't really respect that guy. I don't have a lot of, I don't think very highly of him because he hasn't done anything that I consider to be worthy. On the other hand, there's this kid over here who's been an apprentice in our community for 10, 15 years. He works his butt off every single day. He's always had a positive attitude. He always does what he's told. And now he has proven that he is a craftsman himself, and I just think he's awesome. And I think the world of him, and I wish him the very best as he moves into life. And as he gets older and he takes on other leadership roles in our community, he has earned his place as opposed to that nobleman who hasn't. Now, on the other hand, what about that kid that was apprenticed out, spent 2 or 3 years at it, complained every day, refused to do the work, and ended up quitting because they're so mean to me? Well, sorry, man, I don't respect you, right? I don't have any respect for somebody. Look, I went through the same work you did, but for some reason I was able to finish, right? I was yelled at and bossed around and told what to do, and I went through it, and now here I am. So, quit your complaining. You sleep in the bed you make. You were given an opportunity to succeed. You chose not to take advantage of that. You chose not to do the work. So honestly, I don't have a lot of respect for you. You're poor because of the choices you made, right? The same is true with those poor peasants out there. Burghers, middle classes tended to look down on the peasantry. They tended to not think very highly of the peasants. Because you know what? If you're some poor dirt farmer living outside of town and you never have any money and you never learn to read, I've got a great idea. How about you do something better with your life? How about you step up? How about you come into town and say, hey, I'd like to be an apprentice? Right? How about you say to yourself, I don't want to be a poor peasant anymore. I want to work my way up. How about that? Investment is not just money. We can invest our money. We can go buy stock in the stock market. We can go put our money in the bank. We can go and invest our money so that we have more later on. But you can also invest in yourself, can't you? You can invest in your own future. You can look and say, you know what? The best financial advice I could ever take is making A's in my classes. That's the best financial move you will ever make, making A's. Because people that make A's end up making a lot of money, don't they? You want to know what the very best scholarship is? The very best way to pay for college? Make A's. Right? Because if you make A's in all your classes, somebody else ends up paying for your college, right? And so investing in yourself is just as important as saying, I'm going to invest the money I make. When you have time, use that time wisely. When you have the ability to make your life better, don't sit around and complain if you chose not to. And that's what being an apprentice was all about. And so this is a different attitude, right? And then people, of course, very rightly say, what about people that didn't have that opportunity, right? What about people who don't have the ability or don't have the chance? Or, what about kids who weren't born into families that promote them and give them that ability, right? If everybody kind of starts at a different line, don't they? Right? And that kid that was born into a craft family that then apprenticed him out and pushed him and made him do well and had the right connections and knew the right people, he's got a head start over the poor peasant, doesn't he? So there's a debate to be had there. But you understand the middle class attitude. Now, it's not going to take long before these middle class people start saying, we want to have a say in the law. We want to have a say in the government. We want to have a say in how we're taxed. We want to have a say in how we are administered. After all, that nobleman, what gives him the right to tell me what laws I should live by? Me and my fellow guildsmen, we're the ones who have really invested in ourselves. Don't you think we should? So that's where things get even more interesting. How about this? I'll show you a few pictures here real quick. This is, and I simplified the becoming a craftsman process. Okay, and I've simplified guilds in a big way because guilds would end up becoming regional. Guildsmen would be able to work in different places from one town to the next. There would be different levels of craftsmen. You could become one, and then you become two, and then you become a master craftsman. There's different rankings, if you will. And oftentimes, to become the highest ranking craftsman in a profession, you would have to produce something that demonstrated your skill, which is called a masterpiece. And your masterpiece is the creation that shows that you really have the chops. And this is a masterpiece from a furniture maker, and I believe this dates to the 16th century, the 1500s. And this is all handmade and all perfect, and you can understand. Whoever did this really, really knew how to make a cabinet, didn't he? And this is a masterpiece to prove I have the skills. And of course, there's, here's the wine, right? If winemakers, there was a guild of winemakers. Yes, they stomp it out with their feet. I guess that adds extra flavor. And of course, this guy is, wait a second, y'all can't see it. There you go. And of course, we have that fellow on the right who's sampling the merchandise. I guess one of the advantages of being a winemaker is that you get all the wine you want. Back to it. Quick question. If you are a nobleman, and I want you to look here at this picture again. She'll look way in the background. Notice you got a big castle on the hill, right? Somebody fancy lives there. If you are a nobleman, do you want a town on your land or do you not want a town on your land? What would be your preference? Yes. Now remember, all these town dwellers, these middle-class guys, they're going to start wanting authority. They're going to want to start governing themselves, right? This is my land, my rules. But having a town on your land means money. Having a town on your land means your place as a nobleman can become considerably stronger. There's just no two ways about it. And so what would happen is these medieval towns, because they've got to be built on someone's land, some nobleman's land, there would typically be the noble lord, and then there would be the town that he sort of rules over because he's the He's the boss man of that territory. And what would happen is the town dwellers would negotiate town charters. They would negotiate town charters with the local nobleman. And this town charter would, discuss who gets to make the laws. Oftentimes the town would get to sort of govern itself, how taxes are collected, how municipal services might be provided. What happens if a fire breaks out, for example, and here are the rules and who participates, all kinds of stuff like that. And so there's always a give and a take. The nobleman can obviously offer the town one thing that's very important, because the nobleman has an army. And so we don't live in a completely safe world. And so the nobleman goes to the town and says, I will use my army to protect this town. Bad guys will stay away because I'm here and I'm going to keep you safe. But of course, that town is going to have to pay him for it, right? That nobleman is going to have expectations from the town as well. So there's always kind of a give and a take and a back and forth. Town councils would be set up, much like city councils today, the precursors to that. And that middle class will, over time, start asserting itself more and more and more. Now, I do want to talk about life in the Middle Ages in some ways, because there's quite a few, I guess we would say, myths, quite a few commonly held beliefs about the way people lived back during this era that are not entirely true. Not entirely true. One of the beliefs I think that we typically have is that everybody was ignorant and primitive, and society was unnecessarily cruel. We hang and kill people that pick pockets and stuff like that. That's not necessarily true. Humans are humans and people are people. As one historian pointed out, for example, the crime rate in your typical medieval town was probably lower than your typical big city today. You're actually probably safer walking down the street of a feudal town than you would walking down the street of one of our big cities. And so, life was not necessarily dangerous. The people were perhaps less literate than today. But nonetheless, there was a lot more civilization, a lot more respect for your neighbor and things like that than we would often think maybe was the case. One myth that probably needs to be sorted out is that people probably worked a lot less then than they do today. And I know that sounds kind of silly. Life is all this drudgery all the time back then. You think they're working, morning to night. Actually, as they pointed out, that people probably had more free time than we do today, which is an interesting phenomenon. The typical medieval peasant, for example, working the land, your typical serf or small farmer, probably worked only 50% of the time. Half of the days during the year were probably completely work-free, because it was either no work because the crops are growing and we have no field work to do, or it's a holiday or whatever. They probably only actually labored 1 out of every 2 days. And so that's not too bad. Now, remember, we also have to keep in mind, we get weekends off and things like that. So people don't work every day here either. At least I certainly hope you don't. How about the fact that people were filthy and dirty, right? How about the fact that people were all grimy and covered, and all of this? That is not necessarily true either. People did bathe. People enjoyed staying clean. Bathing was not like it is today because they didn't have running water in their houses. And so you getting your own bathtub or shower, that was something that typically wouldn't be the case. But we do know that people bathed. People had very different rituals and processes when it came to bathing. Frequently they would, and this is something that was common, bathing and eating would kind of be together. And they would have taverns that would sort of serve as a place where you eat, a place where you bathe, and I guess we got a room for sexy time too. And that was actually a real common thing. And what they would do is they would have a tub, and 2 people would sit in it, often a man and a woman, and then they would put a board in between, and they would serve food while you're taking a bath, and the bath water gets on the food while you're eating, and they're playing footsies with each other under the, I'm sure they are, yeah. What's that? Yeah, go away for a first date. That's right. Yeah, take you. That's right. I've got a great thing for us to do on Friday night. That's absolutely. And they would have entertainment here. Here's a guy playing a lute, and they're putting on some sort of performance. And again, if you look over to the left, we got a little giggity going on over there. I don't know. I know a party when I see one, though, folks, and I'm pretty sure one is happening here. Here is actually a surviving pool from this era. I believe this is in England. Again, people didn't typically take individual baths because you have to carry the water in, and you also have to keep in mind you have to light a fire to heat the water. They don't have hot running water. And so oftentimes they would be big communal pools, and people would all sort of bathe together. And that's just kind of how it is. And you can see also, modesty is not quite what we think it is either. People thought that back then they were a lot more modest. Actually, people were a lot less modest back then because you just don't really have the opportunity to, I mean, it's just, we're all people and we're going to just kind of let it all hang out. And that was one of those things, right? Just, there you go. One of the myths from this era is, that medicine was so horrible, right? Every time somebody got sick, we thought that, I don't know, you were cursed or something, and that doctors and medical treatment was also primitive and terrible. And it is worth noting that medicine back then was certainly not what we would want it to be today. You certainly don't want to go to a doctor during the medieval era. But that doesn't mean they didn't try. They would put genuine effort into trying to improve people. It's just that the knowledge wasn't there. What is the most common treatment for just about any kind of illness? Pretty much all the way up through the 19th century, to tell you the truth. I mean, you get pretty much into the modern era before they quit doing it. What would be the most common thing people would do? Well, alcohol was always part of it. Yeah, the alcohol. Bleeding. Y'all have heard about bleeding. Yeah, y'all have heard about bleeding, right? If you get any kind of illness, they would, cut open a vein and you would bleed out about a pint of blood. And that was what they would do with just about any kind of sickness. And you think, how ridiculous is that, right? How dumb is it to think that bleeding somebody is going to make them better? But there is a certain logic to it. I want you to think about this for a minute. We've all been sick before, you've had the flu or something like that. And you feel really awful, and it's a horrible experience. And there is an absolutely wonderful medication for that, and that medication is called NyQuil, right? Now, what does NyQuil do? It talks about, stuffy, whatever. What does NyQuil really do? It burns. Yeah. It's strong stuff. It makes you go to sleep. That's exactly right. At the end of the day, that's exactly right. We drink a big chug of NyQuil whenever we get the flu or something because really it just makes us go to sleep. And what I want to do is I want to go to sleep. I want to sleep for a good long time. And of course, when I wake up later, I feel better, don't I? Well, that's the thing with bleeding. Now, they didn't know why it worked, but if you bleed out about a pint of blood or whatever, you're going to get woozy, you're going to get tired, you're going to go to sleep. And then when you wake up later, you feel better. And so they thought, maybe there's something to this. Maybe it's a treatment. Now, we know that's not really what's going on, and it's a bad idea to take blood out of somebody who's sick. But remember, they didn't understand that germs cause illness. They didn't know what viruses were. They didn't know what bacteria was. So there we go. And there's another similar treatment, which again, isn't actually real, but it feels like it might be. If you've got a really bad upset stomach and you go in and you barf up everything you've eaten in the past week, you feel better afterwards, don't you? You feel a lot better. And now it's a terrible experience, but when it's all over with, you feel better. And so they would give, herbs and stuff that would either make you vomit or work as a laxative, because the idea is to just get it out of you. Get whatever's bad in out, and you feel better when it's over with. And a more modern version of that, again, it has no medical value at all, but it was real common, really all the way up until quite recently, is castor oil. Castor oil was something that parents used to give their kids when they would get sick because it works as a laxative. And the parents would be convinced, we got to clean out the pipes and you'll be better. And of course, now doctors definitely don't think you should ever take castor oil. But that was a home remedy, if you will, because it would get the bad out, if you will. Here is some medicine from this era. That guy on the left is definitely not enjoying life right now. Someone's yanking a tooth. That is definitely not a dentist I want to go see. Oddly enough, people's teeth didn't go bad the way they do today because people didn't eat much sugar. And so human remains that date back to the Middle Ages or even to the Roman era and before tended to have really very good teeth. Very few decay at all because no sugar and your teeth won't decay. So there you go. But of course, every once in a while a tooth goes bad, and there's only one solution, if you're living in the Middle Ages, right? Just yank that sucker. Here is down below on the right, we have a woman giving birth. Midwifery was a common practice. Women would typically give birth in their homes. Today, that's a really, really bad idea. Childbirth is not something that is safe. I just don't know a better way to put it than that. When everything goes right, it's fine, but when it goes wrong really, really badly. And so anyone who would tell you that you're fine going with a midwife and just having your baby at home, you say, no, do not do it. Yeah, you're shaking your head for a reason. It is a bad, bad idea. The only way you should ever have a child is in a hospital with a bona fide OBGYN right there. Because if everything goes fine, no problem. But if it goes bad really, really quick. Children that are born, with this whole home birth thing are 500 times more likely to die than children that are born in a hospital. And so anybody that would tell you the whole midwife thing and the home birth is as safe as a hospital is either lying or hoping that you're stupid, because you are not safe having a baby at home. You are safe having a baby in a hospital. You wouldn't have surgery at home, right? If somebody said, lie down on your kitchen table and I'm going to bring in somebody who is not a surgeon and they're going to cut out your appendix, you'd think I was out of your mind. You're crazy, right? What kind of person would have somebody operate on them that wasn't a surgeon and not do it in a hospital? Well, having a baby is the same way. So never do that. But back then, that's how it worked, and we know why. I don't even know why I put this in here, except that I'm just a disturbed guy. This guy's having a bad day. I don't know any way to put it. Why did they let the dog watch? It's an enema of some sort, The guy's constipated or whatever, and they brought in a sketch artist because hundreds of years later we need to see if you're so sick that you can't take medicine through your mouth, you'll barf it up. Well, you gotta go in another way. Anyway, and they let the dog watch. That's the whole thing, right? The dog's like, hey. Here is an interesting artifact. This dates to, I believe, the 13th century. And this is obviously human remains. And what they have done is use this to study how the human body works. They sawed off his skull there to reveal the brain underneath, and they dissected his head. They know that when they found this about 10 years ago, this guy's arteries and veins had been injected with some sort of preservative. They don't know what it is, but something to preserve and plump up the arteries and veins so they can kind of see where everything went. So this is really fascinating. I forget where this was discovered, but it dates back to the 13th century. And so even though, again, they're not getting medicine right, there's an awful lot that they don't know. They are trying, right? There's a very real effort to improve people's lives through medical practice. It's just the scientific revolution hasn't happened. And so I'm sure he was dead. I can only imagine. I would hope that he would be. Yeah. And by the way, yes, there is a version of doing this sort of thing while the subject is alive. It's called vivisection. And you would never obviously want to do it on a person, but there is a time when people will do vivisection on animals to see how they work, see how their bodies work whenever they're still alive, and that is a thing. And I don't think they do it anymore, but what they would do is like take a rat and they would inject it with something to loop it up real good, and then they would, so you can actually see it going. Y'all have done worms in biology class, right? Where well, the worm is actually still alive when you're doing that. I hate to say that, or a lot of times they are. It sounds very cruel, but anyway, this guy, I'm sure, was dead by then. If you can make it to your 5th birthday, your chances of surviving into adulthood are pretty good. And so the infant mortality rate was very high. But, after that, you're going to get sick, but you're generally going to get better. Life expectancy back then it was actually longer than we might think. There's no shortage of people that lived into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Not as many as today, of course, but the whole point is that the reason why we think people died young then is because they're averaging the wrong way. They're factoring in all of the infant mortality rather than looking at a median or a mean. So there we have it. And speaking of there we have it, I want to talk about the rise of the states, but we only have a few minutes. And so why don't we go ahead and end it today, and I will see everybody on Wednesday. Sound good? All right. Everybody take care. Again, be safe from the storm. Let's hope it continues to not be that big of a deal, but be prepared. And don't forget, we're still in Module 5.